Welcome back to the Raice Brothers podcast. What up? What up? I'm super excited to have my main man, my old friend, one of my favorite people in the world on the podcast with us today, Yochanan Pollack. We're excited to get into all kinds of interesting, juicy topics about emotional health, emotional awareness, and whatnot. Yehuda?
Hey,
Thank you, Yaakov,
Yochanan.
for your introduction.
It's good to see you, Yochanan. So
Likewise.
I'll tell you, I'm also super excited about this topic. I think that it's become a major focus in the world and in the Jewish community. It's definitely been opening up more and more. I know that in my own personal avoda, you've definitely inspired so much within me and taught me so much. And emotional awareness. I mean, listen, this is something that's huge. So maybe just like kick us off, like why today is emotional awareness such an issue, and why does it seem to be that there's so many more issues than in the past?
Well, I don't know if there are so many more issues in the past, but one thing that does mean a lot to me is this idea that we will have hearts of stone. It says in Tanakh that it's kind of like a curse, and it's the way I look at it is like, the gullus just kind of adds on layers and layers of dust until our hearts become hard. And in the end of days, which is where we are now, God says, I will turn your heart of stone into a heart of flesh. And, the way I'm looking at it is God retreated. Now we're in Tammuz. We're getting ready for the days ahead of us. God retreated, in 10 stages from Jerusalem, from the Beis Hamikdash, from Jerusalem, from Eretz Yisrael. And at each stage, it was like a fracture in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And our hearts got a little colder each time. And throughout the generations, it became harder and harder just to survive. And you think about our Zaydis. They just had to run away from Cossacks. They came to America. They had to make a dime. They had to sacrifice everything. And they had to lose their job. My great Zaidi had to lose his job every Erev Shabbos. I mean, you have to have a heart of stone to really, survive. And as we get closer to the Geula, we were given a huge matana. The matana also came in stages. We had the light of the Baal Shem Tov. The Gemara says really there are 2,000 years of Ikfa the Mashiach. So we had Rabbi Shimon, and that gave us light. And we had the Baal Shem Tov and the great Hasidic masters, the Vilna Gaon, and those great masters. And now we're here, and instead of running away from Cossacks, we have time to think about things. We have time to wonder who we are again, what we are again. Some of us even have time to go to therapy, and the affluence affords us the ability to go to therapy and delve even deeper into our personal pain and also our collective pain as a Jewish people. So I think that nowadays we're experiencing this transformation into the heart of flesh.
Well, very interesting. That's an interesting take.
It's something I've also been thinking about a lot. I feel like we've discussed that as well. I feel like that's in the Mashiach process, that's such an integral part of the process that we have the ability, like you said, we have the space now. Instead of we're transitioning from a life of survival to a life of physical survival to a life of now we can focus on the emotional and deal with all the years of trauma that we've had and not had time to deal with.
Right.
As a nation, we kind of have all these, all this national trauma. And if you look at it from a Kabbalistic perspective, we are souls that are coming back again and again, So it could be that the trauma experienced in our past lives is also finally we have the time to deal with that.
Yeah. It's an amazing thing because, sorry, Yehuda, I don't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
It's just an amazing thing that, the distance and the pain of Gullus, to me, it seems like Hashem was kind of saying, you didn't appreciate me. You had me. You didn't appreciate how good things were and how close we were and how free you were. So I'm going to let you feel what distance feels like. You know, from the first guy who closed his door with half of a piece of an avodah zarah, and the other half of the avodah zarah, trying to hide it from Chizkiyahu Melech, like from that first guy trying to look outside of the relationship, exiting the relationship to get some kind of pleasure, sipuk, or depth. And God says, you want to feel what it's going to be like without me? You're going to feel like what it's going to be like without me. And now HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us back Eretz Yisrael and kind of gave us this opportunity to come close again with all the Torahs that we have, with all of the amazing. Eretz Yisrael is a huge part. I feel like really there was a part of my soul that only opened up when I landed in Eretz Yisrael. And then when I stayed here for a little bit longer, it opened up a little bit more. And then after like 3 years, I remember like after 3 years, I felt like, whoa, is Mashiach coming? What's going on? I feel something different, a different reality. And that was, 17, 18 years ago from when I first really thought like, hey, there's Geula here. And I think a big part of that is that we're back home and this is where we feel better. We feel safer. It's the therapist's office, the palace of the king where I can be myself. And like, I don't have to fit into the rigid boxes of surviving Yiddishkeit. Now we're more into like the thriving Yiddishkeit. And I could just, have friends and have chaverim and kumzits and good learning. And like, now I can let some of that trauma come out. Arthur Dranoff says, he says in his book, The Primal Scream, you take an amoeba and you put it into a glass of water and you put some Indian ink into the water. What the amoeba does is it takes all that black ink and it takes it to its core because it's trying to protect itself. So it takes it as deep and shoves it in as much as possible. That's like suppressing all of our emotional pain. And then you take that amoeba and you put it into a clean cup of water. And what it does is it starts to let it go further out until it expels it. So like Eretz Yisrael for us is like the clean cup of water. We can now kind of be dysfunctional again and kind of let our issues come out because now we can finally deal with them. And sometimes people say, oh, Israelis, they're a bit rough around the edges. No, we're just back in the family again. It's just a dysfunctional family again where we could all kind of air our dirty laundry and be ourselves and let's deal with it instead of having to be prim and proper with the necktie.
That's so true. That's so true. I know so many of my friends, my American Israeli friends, talk about that all the time. They go to America. They're like, we heard it's so good, but like, I can't handle it. It's so fake. I need the realness. I need somebody who could just yell at me in public because he actually cares about what I'm doing. Not like, you know what I mean? It's like a crazy idea.
I used to get annoyed when every old lady in the street would tell me to put a hat on my son or put the shade on in this, and it's too cold. And I realized everyone's my buddy over here.
Right. That's the truth.
But it's also, like you said, because we have the safety here. I've never felt unsafe around other Jewish Israelis. And no matter where you go, you could be around like really the roughest people here. I don't remember feeling unsafe. Very rarely. And that gives you, when you have that safety. So then I know if somebody's yelling at me, it's not coming from a bad place necessarily. It's coming from like,
it's rough around the edges. There's a concept in psychology called the IP, the identified patient. The idea is that there's always one kid in every family who takes on everyone takes on all the neuroses of, let's say, the parents and the grandparents, like collective consciousness of pain. And they all kind of play along to an extent. And there's always that one kid, he doesn't play along. He exposes the family's neuroses. He's exactly what it really is. And he's called the identified patient. I feel like here we're living in a country with a bunch of identified patients. Everyone's just being real. And sometimes it's like, impatient. And because we have that in us. But I also feel like it's very healing. And, I don't feel the divisions that, I don't feel like I have to fit into a box. I don't feel like I have to not be myself around. And I'm home. Let's face it, this is home.
Can you explain a little bit more about that identified patient idea? Because when you said it, it made me think of like, are the Jews the identified patient of the world?
That's what Hitler said, right? You know, we're the conscience of the people. I mean, people say it's not actually in Mein Kampf, but there is a strong anti-Semitic concept that the Jews are plaguing all of mankind because we give them a conscience, because we're truth seekers. You know, if you go into any Barnes and Noble or library, most self-help books are either written by the Mormons or the Jews. You know, we dominate the self-help, department in any bookstore because we're always looking. We're looking to get out of Gullus. You know, we're looking to come home. But simply speaking, an identified patient is a person who doesn't really suppress, doesn't play along with everything is fine here, which this is normal. We're just a normal family, you know. I can tell you as a therapist, there's no such thing as normal. Everybody suffers. Everybody's in pain. Everybody who touches the lave busser feels, ouch, that hurts. You know, we have this deep, deep insecurity of somehow I'm bad and I need to heal that. And the identified patient, he walks around with that on his sleeve and he acts out in that way. And sometimes the parents want to send him away, you know, go to a different place, go to a different town, you know, go learn over there. You know, it's bad for shidduchim. It's bad for the picture we're trying to paint. When really this person is just saying, I'm not going to pretend, you know? So that's really what the identified patient does. So I never thought of it before, but I really like the idea that the Jewish people are the IP of the world.
I feel like it kind of drives and pokes everybody to deal with their things, you know, that like, hey, we got to deal with this because we can't hide from it. And you can't just pretend that everything's okay. Like, let's deal with it. Let's be real. Like enough of the fakeness. I need to be authentic. I can't handle, I can't handle the fight. I resonate with that idea.
Yeah. I'm reading a book now, history of the Jews from early days of Germany and since the 1700s by author Alon. He's amazing. And he says part of, Mendelssohn came and they celebrated him, and Meinman came and they celebrated him. He had a lot of negative things to say about Orthodox Jews, but Mendelssohn did not. Mendelssohn really tried showing people like, this is good stuff. This is like healthy. And the goyim around him, even though they respected their philosophy so much, and they really felt like these people are amazing, amazing thinkers. But what bothered them so much is like, fact that these Jews won't change. They won't change the way they dress. They won't change the way they speak. They won't change the way they think. And it really bothered them that we were so stubborn and that we really were like, no, this is our truth. We're going to live by it. And that really bothered people because they felt it was like an affront to progressive thinking. And they were insulted by it. And that, the Jews could be considered that. I love that thought. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Just to go back to what we were talking about before, you mentioned that idea of the heart of stone. And I definitely, like Yaakov mentioned, like we definitely have spoken about the idea a lot that now in this time of history, we definitely have more of the ability to deal with the emotional health. But the idea that you brought up that we had to have the heart of stone because that was actually the healthy way to survive up until that point. I'm curious because religion and how it's been functioning, I see it more. There's some aspect of like Western civilization or the Industrial Revolution that's brought all these incredible comforts that made things more comfortable. So now we can kind of get more authentic, maybe with what's underlying. And I see that that's happening, Jewry around the world, people around the world, both Israel, America. But the idea that like religion, so to speak, in some ways in the past was a way of maybe expressing emotional unhealth or making emotional unhealth like kind of okay. And now we're kind of dealing with some of those things and we're trying to open it up. Let me, like maybe for example, somebody who's neurotic and he needs to take out his neurosis. So he's, doing Netilas Yadayim and maybe like Tara and like super like careful. And really it's not an issue of religious fervor, but really it's just an emotional, unhealthy place. So I'm curious as to this dynamic because of how it kind of has been changed over the years. And now things are we are open to this emotional health avoda.
So I'll tell you, I mean, I'm not sure, you'll tell me if I answer your question.
The truth is, I think I had like 3 questions in there, but.
Right, so a few things popped into my head. I mean, one thing is, in a way, we're all addicted to something. And there's ways of coping which are healthy, and there's ways of coping which are not healthy. So first of all, religion, on one hand, is a very safe, good, positive way of coping because you can use it to enhance your life and create structure in your life and functionality, as opposed to, let's say, drugs, alcohol, promiscuity, things that could really lead you away. On the other hand, it's even more dangerous and insidious because if a person thinks he's doing the right thing, like the Rambam says, a person doesn't even realize he has to do tshuva, he has the hardest time in Hilchos Tshuva, right, to do tshuva. So a person thinks he's got it because he's religious, and he could really be missing the boat in terms of not having an emotional connection to Hashem. So, it's very important to realize that everything can be used for good and for bad. Bracha v'klala. It's really like, for us to say that the modern world, modernity in general, has afforded us amazing opportunities. Just this webinar, just this podcast that we're doing now is modern. You're able to sit in Ramat Beit Shemesh. I'm able to sit here in Jerusalem. We're able to talk. We're able to communicate with all of our friends and family. This is modern. And how it's used is really the question. So a Jew is the Torah is amazing because the halacha is always changing, right? It's always changing. It's alive. The Torah is alive. And we have to change with it. And we always have to be reflecting on, is this healthy? Is this not healthy? Rabbi Yamin used to say, Rabbi Yamin Moskowitz, the Rosh Hashanah used to say, something like the Satan is pushing your head into the Gemara. So you shouldn't think about why you're learning or what the learning is about. And you have to be careful that every now and again to assess, am I using religion in an erotic way? I remember the first time I had a question of, should I go to shul now or not go to shul right now? On one hand, it's time. Sight is sight. On the other hand, one of the kids is crying right now. What does God want? To really always remember, like the great Rabbi Akiva said, Kol Gadol b'Torah is v'yaftal re'echa kamocha. To always be putting things derech eretz kadmol Torah. Again, all these things are inbuilt in the religion to protect us from becoming robots. To always realize, like, wait a second, I have to love my fellow before I worry about Bainalam Lamakom. I have to really make sure my Bainalam Lachaveru is in place. On the other hand, when doing this emotional work and tapping into your late basar, a person could somehow all of a sudden feel liberated and free. Something like some of Mendelssohn's Talmidim, right, in Europe, and the Enlightenment. Wait a second, we're free from the shackles of, the poverty and the being blacklisted by the Goyim. And now all of a sudden we're free. What to do with that freedom? So on one hand, being free is so important because only, right, Torah gives you chayros, right? Ein ben chor and elo misha osek ba Torah. But if you're not learning the right Torah, it'll enslave you. So it has to be Sam Chaim Torah and not Sam Mavis Torah. On the other hand, while freeing yourself, if all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm free, and you lose your Yiras Shamayim, or you lose the part of you which says, wait a second, boundaries are important, the Chas V'Shalom, a person can kind of forget about the Amelus Torah, Lefum Tzar Agra part of Torah, because they're just so sick of the Tzar. And we have to realize that, wait, there's good Tzar and bad Tzar. And there's good freedom and bad freedom. And we always have to be so careful. And Baruch Hashem, Jews are clever, and we do think, and we have to use this all the time to be, chayne in the das. We have to always be using our das to say, which way. The way I describe the work to a lot of people when they say, why should I do this work? Why should I get in touch with my heart? I say, imagine a car. You got your steering wheel and you got your engine. Your steering wheel is your sechel. Your engine is your heart. If you don't have a steering wheel, it's still a car. You just can't go anywhere. But if you don't have a heart, if you don't have an engine, it's not a car. So we have to know that this is the main thing. Rachmana libo ba, Hashem wants our heart. We need avodah shabalev. We need to connect with our heart. But if we don't have a steering wheel, we're not going anywhere. So we really need to use both in tandem as we go towards mental, emotional well-being, and balance. And I have to even admit, when I was a junior therapist, I just started out, I was really excited about busting people's hearts open because I felt so liberated when my heart was open. And then I saw, wait a second. That's not what I meant. I didn't mean you should go out now and God forbid, forgive everything under the sun. You have to kind of take forgiveness and take acceptance and take self-love, but channel it in the right way. And it's a learning curve, to be honest.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've noticed that a lot with many people as well, that sometimes you can get into feeling and being so open and being so real that you get so stuck in that's all that people do. And they lose the focus of, hey, you also have to get out and be productive and do things. I kind of look at it as like a balance between chesed and gevura, right? Chesed is this open feeling, what's really going on. Let me feel what I'm feeling right now. Let me just always be tuned in. And gevura says, hey, but you also got to go out and accomplish and have structure and have bookends to an experience and be able to put things into some kind of formulation and be able to balance that.
Exactly.
How do you help people though achieve that balance? Because I feel like that balance really is it's so hard, especially when you're going from
let me tell you. Let me. First of all, did I answer the previous question at all?
That was good. I mean, we probably have more of it that we have to unpack, but that's good.
I wasn't sure. Let me tell you a little bit about me and a little bit about my history, and I'll give you if maybe this gives a perspective. I felt as a young child that I was very sensitive and very emotional, but at the same time, a very good coper and highly functional, and I was very sociable. I was able to get along with a lot of people. A lot of people liked me, and it was easy for me to navigate what we call the real world, right? Not all parts of it, but certainly the social aspects of it, okay? And because of that, I became very used to and very comfortable with suppressing my feelings. There was difficult pain in life. There was something that I didn't want to deal with. Okay, no problem. It went under, and I created a false self, which was always cool, always happy. Nothing can bother me. And what I did with all those feelings were I just kept on like the black ink and the amoeba. I just kept on pushing them closer to my core. And when I got older and I had some interesting experiences in the context of relationships with good friends, with family members, I started realizing, wait a second, I'm not really as comfortable as I think I am. I'm not really as cool. I'm not really always as happy. I used to think I was the happiest person I know. And I meet clients like that all the time who tell me, I'm so happy. It can't be that I'm not happy. And I see right through it because I was one of those people. So I needed very much to do this type of work that I'm so passionate about, going into my childhood, finding the times and places when I consciously did that very quickly that it became so rote and subconscious. The decisions became very quickly automatic that I did them after a while, learning how I can just do that and be happy. So I really needed to go deep inside my own heart and bring out the emotions and feel that anger and feel that fear and ultimately feel that guilt that I didn't really love myself. Not all of myself, but there was a real part of me that I didn't accept. And that was very liberating. And that was the beautiful transformative work that I try to pass on to my clients. But I was a super functional guy. Minyan 3 times a day, from the first 10 of the base measures to the last 10 of the base measures. When I wanted to, excellent grades, didn't always want to, right? When I wanted to be, in the good graces of my teachers, no problem. When I didn't want to, I was kicked out. But that was like a decision. I'm going to rebel and I'm going to fight the system, and I got kicked out. But it wasn't because I didn't know what I was doing. I always had a plan. My parents used to make fun of me. Another plan from Planland. I used to come to them with all my plans. They used to they used to just mock me because I was always figuring out how to live life in a better way for me, And to this day, I feel like I know how to live life. This is great. Until I had to go deep, deep inside. I said, oh, wait, maybe I know how to do that. But do I know how to have intimate relationship? Oh, no. That's serious. That's really where it's at. Ultimately, I have to have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I have to have a relationship with my spouse. I have to have a relationship with my children, my parents, my brothers, my sisters, my friends. And I spent many years doing that kind of work. So for me, I had the functional piece, very strong. But the other thing I didn't have, so for me, it was kind of like a good fit. But there are some people who are radically different than me. There are some people who really suffer and struggle with their emotional feelings. They don't know how to suppress so well. Their feelings are there, and it's hurting them, and they're angry, or they're really in pain. For those people, often what they need to learn is what I knew, what was muvan me'alav for me. And I had to learn really what they had, which is this ability to really just be okay with emotion, be okay with my vulnerabilities, with my pain, with what I felt. So for those people, if they come into my office, we do a lot of coping skills. We do a lot of other balancing, and it's always, you have to figure out where people are. But one of the first things I always tell my clients who are especially like me, is like, we're going to break you open possibly and free you in certain ways to an extent. Obviously, they're going to do most of the work. I'm just a facilitator, a guide. But always remember, the Shulchan Aruch comes first. This is our basis. We're not throwing halacha out of the window just because you don't feel like putting on tefillin one day, because maybe your seventh grade Rebbe made fun of you one day with your tefillin and said, no, whatever it was, and you had some trauma with what happened with your tefillin, and you now hate tefillin. That doesn't mean you don't put them on, right? You put them on and you deal with that trauma, right? There are extenuating circumstances where I would tell someone maybe don't put it on, but I would get guidance from a supervisor, from a Rav, before I pulled those kinds of tricks. But you'd be surprised how amazing Rabbanim can be when they hear that people are in pain. They're like, yeah, there's room for a lot. But at the same time, everybody needs to be balanced. So everyone's different. There's a lot of different modalities out there. This work has spoken deeply to me because of my story. And I met a lot of guys who have similar stories to me, and even people who maybe have not the same story, but there's some kind of suppression that went on in their life. Maybe they were more able to feel, but not to the extent that they want to. So we work on that. So some people will have 50% of the therapy will be feeling, and the other 50 will be how to manage those feelings. Whereas for me, it was really almost like 90-10. I really needed to learn that. And only 10% I needed to learn how to not go to chakras, because I always went to chakras my whole life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let me ask you, you had this experience where you were not feeling your inner emotions. You thought you were doing great. Life was going well. When did that, how did you suddenly realize, oh man, it's not real? Like, what brought that up?
Oof. Oy. So first of all, I never knew that I wasn't feeling my feelings, like I said, because I can cry at a kumsitz. I could cry at the last day of camp. Like I was emotional. I felt things deeply. I davened with kavana when I was a little kid. Even I remember sometimes having real deep, meaningful connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to others. So I was unaware. I thought I feel. I also thought I was very open. It's like my life is an open book. I'll tell anybody anything. I'm not guarded, because to the extent that I thought I was open, that's what I was sharing. I was sharing things. I was sharing stories. I love to tell stories. I love to talk, right? As you can see. I like to entertain. So I always thought I was being so open. Now I love it when a client comes in and says, my life's an open book. I'm like, we're going to get to the closed chapter soon. It's going to be really fun. Because when did I realize? I mean, I remember having a fight, a real fight with one of my best friends. That was a shock. I was like, what happened there? That was like a clue. How did I lose myself? Where did this anger come out? I remember having a real fight with my younger brother. You know, we were chavrusas, learning in yeshiva. I was desperate for him to stay in Israel. I was like pulling out all the stops. You got to, you know, you have no God if you live there. You know, I was doing everything I could to get him to stay because I really felt it so strongly that I tasted enlightenment. I tasted home. You can't go back there. I also knew what kind of, you know, darkness was there. I knew that my soul didn't resonate there. Now I'm a bit more mature and I realized that this was all a gift. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me the gift of feeling this. And I can take zero credit. And maybe because of that, I have responsibility to talk about it. But he has a different gift. You know, he was such a masmidi with this. And I was, you know, a little bit distracted even when I was learning, you know. So, but having a big fight with him really like shook me up. And then I would say the most intense relationship you're ever going to have in your entire life is marriage. And Baruch Hashem, you know, and today now with my wife, you know, to be honest, even last night we had a thing, it was date night. And sometimes on date night, we make the mistake of talking about things we shouldn't talk about. And like, ego, it's not my ego, it's this, it's that, what is it? And yeah, it is my ego. But where did my ego come from? My ego, which is another term is called the false self, was crafted, systematically built to protect me from pain. Pain that I had as a child. And whenever I was hurt, another little layer of that ego was put in place to protect me. So I realized that I wasn't feeling when people that I loved had problems with me in the context of relationships. There were other clues also along the way that I realized that I was like avoiding things, like not always being so honest with myself, kind of wondering how I could be a hypocrite when I was a teenager. I despised hypocrisy. How could it be now that in some ways I find myself doing something similar? Road rage is a great example. I tell people, you know, what happened? Some guy, I was going like this and some guy just went like that. You know, I was going 65 miles an hour. He went 70 and then went quickly down to 62. And all of a sudden I want to rip his head off. What is that? You know, that's called a 90-10. That's when every single time I was ever disrespected or I was ever pushed down or I was ever told like, you're not important or not considered, all of a sudden it came out in one moment like a lion that I wanted to kill that guy on the road. What was that? That's called a 90-10. That means 90% of what I'm experiencing is really the past. And only 10% of it is intellectually. I understand only 10% of it is some guy didn't notice me on the road or didn't care, but I don't even know him. So these are the clues when you feel yourself having a experience emotionally that is way stronger than the stimulus.
Wow. It sounds like something that probably most people, like everybody has that. Nobody's really, you know, so emotionally self-aware naturally, you know, of what's inside. I mean, road rage is super common. Even the most calm people get upset when something happens, you know, so obviously it's very widespread.
Yeah.
Maybe everyone should be in therapy.
Everyone should have a chaver tov that they can talk to about these things, that can needle them, that can call them out on their stuff. You know, basically, a good friend is not a good friend unless he pushes you to become a person he'd be willing to live with. You know, can I live with this guy? If I can't live with him, if I wouldn't want to live in the same room, in the same home as him, and we're all married, so we know what that means. That's intense, 24/7. Then you're not really his friend. If you're not really his best friend, you don't need to do this with everybody. You should not do this with everybody. But you know what I mean? Like a real friend is someone you can say, you know, you do this sometimes. And, you know, it's not good for you. And I don't like it. Or whatever it is. Like that's a big madrega to have a chaver tov.
Right. Well, that's not always so easy. I mean, you know,
Right. I paid someone personally thousands and thousands of shekel to be that guy in my life. And I still have one. I'm still continuing because, to me, it's in my line of work, it's not a luxury. It's a necessity. I need to keep emotionally even keeled because I'm dealing with a lot in my work for Amudim and in my work in private practice and in my life in general. I came to admit, I denied it for a long time, but I came to admit that I'm an intense person at times. Be intense. And I need to, I used to think I wasn't intense. Me, intense? What? I'm just, it's okay. Have another beer. But, without self-medication, there's a lot of intensity. And it's important for me to have someone I could speak to. And I really value that.
Right. I mean, more and more as I've gotten older and coming to, the awareness of the importance of emotional health and awareness, I feel like it used to be that someone who'd gone to therapy in the shidduch world, like that was a stigma. Oh, he's been to therapy, he has issues. I mean, I feel like more and more, and hopefully it's going to increase. It'll come to a time when, you're looking into shidduchim, it's like, has he been to therapy? No.
Why not?
Not for my kid. Not for my kid. I want someone who's been to therapy and has worked out and has worked on their emotional health. Because if they're going to come into a marriage and they haven't worked on themselves, it's not going to, it's going to be a lot harder. Most people aren't naturally emotionally balanced.
No, you're saying something that I think is true, but it's hard to say. It's hard to say that every single person, because people who don't relate to what we're relating to right now, will be like, what are you talking about? So I would say, if I was interviewing prospective people for my children, I would say, would you be willing to, if 3 people in your life said they think it's a good idea, one being your spouse, the other one being me, your future father-in-law, and maybe a Rebbe, would you consider it,
I think you're going to scare a lot of people away.
Maybe, but I think it's fair. 3 people suggesting, not like you have to go to therapy in order to date my daughter or my son.
You want to date my daughter? You have to accept me as a judge of your emotional stability. Are you willing to accept me as one of the 3 people in your life that you're going to allow to judge your emotional stability? If
it
not,
doesn't have to be only me. But
and you have to have her own by 10.
Right. No, I don't mean that we would need that as like as a condition. What I mean is I'd like it to be accepted in the world that this is a mila, this is something which can only help. And not, it's not for people that have issues. It's for ordinary people, that we all have issues, a recognition that we all have issues and we're all a little bit screwed up. And we can only get better by working on these things. And to the point where
right. The only dangerous thing about therapy is when a person thinks, been there, done that. That's the only danger, when he thinks, I did it already, I don't have to do it anymore. And that's like the Rambam's thing of the very religious person who thinks he doesn't have to do tshuva. So if a person's, I think one of the goals of therapy is humility. That's the goal. If you get to humility, then okay, you could push off seeing your therapist or anyone for a few years until someone tells you you're not being so humble. My wife knows the big, I told her, I was joking around with her the other day. She told me, you're not feeling your feelings. Like, that's the worst thing you could tell me. Like, if you tell me that, I have to okay, maybe you got me, because even today, after years of doing this and after years of teaching this, there are plenty of times where I don't feel my feelings because like Yehuda was saying before, I got to get up, I got to get to shul, got to get the kids to Gan, I got to get to work, I got to put food on the table. So we're not always, especially men, women more so. My easiest clients are female clients because they're so close to almost feeling their feelings all the time anyways. Which is why, that's the Bini Yisera maybe that they talk about. This ability to really be able to feel their feelings. And because of that, they have more needs. I say underneath feelings are needs. Really, that's what's underneath. And frustrated needs equal pain. And suppressing of those needs equals suffering. So what we have to do is we have to have the guts to feel the pain, to understand the needs, and then be able to say what I need in the context of a relationship, in the context for myself. What do I need for me? That's really the goal. To be humble, to realize, Rabbis v'chesroinon, I have so many chisronot. I was created with that lack, and that's my ability. The way I accept my chisronot is to realize that they were God-given. He created me with these chisronot in order that he should fill them. That's my connection to him. I was created with these chesronot in order to have what to pray for, right? It didn't rain until we asked for it. So, and with people, it's hard. In relationships, it's hard. But if we can work on ourselves to be vulnerable in that way, to have those needs and to be able to express them in a mature way to our loved ones, to our spouses, to our brothers and sisters, to our teachers even, to our, to our brothers, then we really grow and gain a tremendous amount from our chaverim, from our intimate group, our intimate circle, and obviously from Hashem. I mean, to realize a big part of me, why didn't I want to feel? Because if I feel, then I'm weak. If I admit I'm scared, then I'm a pachtan. If I admit I'm lonely, then I'm a chanun. I'm like a nerd. If I admit that I'm angry, well, then I'm out of control person. So we have to really
What about if I admit that I'm in pain? It hurts.
And it hurts.
Yeah, it hurts a lot. But what does feeling, I mean, you mentioned it a little bit, what does feeling my own pain really help? Meaning here you are, you're covering up the pain, you're coping with the pain, and now you're saying, feel the pain. How does feeling our pain in a deep way help resolve it?
Well, so first of all, not feeling pain equals suffering. Because it's like putting a blanket on that pain, and enough suppressions will equal a depression. And you can get really, when you ask a person what he's feeling, he says, I feel depressed. I always tell my clients, depression is not a feeling. Depression is the absence of all feeling. So if you suppress enough, you're not feeling anything. What happens if you don't feel, you know what you start to really feel? When I ask them to describe depression, I feel dead. It's death. I feel like I'm no point in living. And God forbid that can lead to severe depression, which could lead to suicidality, because what's the point? So we need meaning. We need to feel alive. We are alive, and we're not connecting with that life in us. That's terribly painful, and that makes us suffer. So not feeling is really not good for us. Second of all, not feeling, it's like a spring. Just gets tighter and tighter and tighter until the road rage incident happens. And if it happens once in a blue moon on the road, that's fine. But what happens if it happens once a week on Friday afternoon? Then you're really in trouble. Your life is living hell. You can't get along with your spouse. It's terrible. What are you going to do? The kids are there. Everyone's watching. And let's say it happens every day, God forbid. Every day in shul, that chazan drives me crazy. You're really an unhappy guy. The way he says Kaddish just grates on my nerves. Dude, you need to feel your feelings. You can't go through life that way. Eventually, you're going to punch someone in the face, or you're going to fall into a deep depression. Or what I did is, because I never hardly got depressed, here's feelings. So you have, let's say, 50% of the population suppress and go into depression. Enough suppression equal a real depression and become dysfunctional. And then there's people like me, more neurotics, who we try to outrun them. Going to the next party, having the next fun, giving the next hug, hey, going to yeshiva and being well-liked by your peers. That's like a drug. And you outrun them, or drugs, or alcohol, or anything. You try to outrun it. And then what happens is you have a whole other slew of problems, of dysfunctionality, of addiction, of other major issues where, you think you're doing so well, but really you're just getting more and more twisted into an egotistical maniac. And that could be, and you see people who have what they call Donald Trump, they say he has a narcissism. So a narcissist, he ends up becoming delusional. You lose touch with yourself. So those are the negatives. Now you asked me positives, so let's go the negatives out of the way first and then go to the positives. The beauty of feeling feelings is it reverses that whole process where it brings you closer to yourself. You're more intimate. I can't really have compassion on Yochanan if I don't really know what he's feeling. If I feel my pain, almost what happens, almost automatically, I start having more compassion for him, right? I say the best way to love yourself is really to feel your feelings, because in order to feel your feelings, you have to accept that feeling. A feeling that I don't want to feel and I put out here I'm basically saying you're no good. And I hate you. I don't like you. I don't love you. And I push myself away. But when I say, okay, I'm willing to take you in, I'm saying I accept you for who you are. I accept you for being human. I accept you for having chisronot. I accept you for having, failings. I accept you for having pain, for having that weakness, for being human. And I come and I bring you in. And the more of that I keep doing, I reach a state of what could be considered shleimut. Now, I'm not there yet, for sure not, but it's more shalem than I was yesterday. Because I'm reclaiming more and more of myself. I'm accepting more of myself. I'm loving more of myself. And the more I love myself, the more I can be me. And the more I can be me, the best me is me. The best version of me is the real me. So if I'm out there being the not me, I'm going to trip over myself eventually. Because I'm in competition with the real me. The more me I can be, the less I care what people think of me. The more comfortable I can be in my own skin. The more proud of myself, the more I accept myself, the more I can say, hey, this is my tachlis, this is who I am. The more I can figure out what it is I need to do in the world for real. I get closer to my tafkid. I get closer to, I wanted to be a Talmud Chacham, and as long as I wasn't willing to accept that I'm not going to be the next Rav Chaim Kanievsky, I couldn't do the work that I do today. Because I wanted to be what my Rebbe told me is the ideal. And I have to really learn how to say, no, that's not my genius. My genius, and everyone's a genius in their own way. As Einstein said, right? We're teaching a fish how to climb a tree. Anybody would feel stupid, right? So when you accept who it is you are and where lies your humanity, your gifts, then you can really begin to celebrate yourself and actualize your potential in the world and stop comparing yourself to others. That is such a liberating geula dika experience. And we're all so different. We all have something to add. I never met a person who I didn't love, couldn't see that he's beautiful, he's perfect. You know what the problem is? He couldn't see it. Right? We all know it's easy to see the other person's greatness, but ourselves, we're our harshest critics. So we reverse that and we begin to really come into a relationship with ourselves. And now I'm no longer insecure. I no longer need other people to accept me or like me or think I'm good or cool. Like when I was a teenager, that was the big deal. Now it doesn't matter. I could be a nerd. It's so fine. And my kids even sometimes say, oh, but you're a nerd. I'm like, yes, I'm getting somewhere. Because that was a really important thing for me.
Wow.
It's interesting because so many friends I know that have taken antidepressants describe how it completely removes all feeling. It creates such a distance and a numbness. And, based on what you're saying, it sounds like the complete opposite of what you're meant to do to get out of a depression.
You're opening up a can of worms here, Yaakov.
Okay.
A whole nother topic. So someone like me didn't need medication and would never have been prescribed medication except maybe Ritalin. So again, depression wasn't my thing. But remember, we were talking about other people before. They have other problems. They suppress. They do go down. Those people, it's a different experience. For them, ideally, you're right. Medication is not good. They should, I have a client who just WhatsApped me. It came up on my screen as we were talking. A whole slew of vitamins that his naturalist gave him to avoid taking Ritalin. And if it works, good. Why was I telling him to take Ritalin? Only for one reason only. Because there was such shalom bias issues from the people he loves the most, he was hurting the most. And not me, but the psychologist in the hospital told him, I would also tell you not to take medication, but because right now your children are little and you don't have time to do the 6 years of therapy that Yochanan did, and they're going to grow up and be out of the house by then, or definitely grown up by then. So right now, just take this for now while you do the therapy. And when it catches up, then for sure, get rid of the medication. He's trying to go the natural way, and I wish him the most hatzlacha. And I tell people, if they can do that, then do that. If there's other ways, if there's natural ways that help you, fine. But there are times when you need medication. And again, when I made this mistake when I was first starting out and all gung-ho and very idealistic, and I'm in my 20s and I just learned all these powerful tools of how never to ever need any medication ever again, because all disease is one thing, dis-ease. And if we can get rid of the dis-ease, we'll get rid of disease. But not everyone can do that at the pace that they need to do that to function. And I'm not a judge who should be on medication. I'm not a psychiatrist. And there's very few psychiatrists that I feel who are on the same page as me. And it's hard to find psychiatrists. Obviously, I would recommend finding psychiatrists who could understand the language that all three of us are speaking here today. And I'm sure that many of your listeners can relate to. But there is a time and place when you just feel like you're underwater and you can't even get to a therapist's office, let alone do the work. Your ego has been so damaged, the same way mine was, but you didn't have the same coping tools that I had. I had friends, I had alcohol, I had parties, and I enjoyed every minute of it. You know? So, but this person maybe feels that they go into shul, and instead of having that charismatic smile that I had, and I was able to like put everyone at ease so no one attacked me, maybe they came in like this. And all of a sudden, they attracted negative energy, and someone came over to them and said, "Hey, why don't you lighten up a little bit?" And they didn't realize that they just actually killed that person that morning. Because they judged them, and they're trying to be happy, but they're suffering. But I was able to fake it. I was going to say, "Hey guys, good morning," no matter what was going on. So I disarmed all of those people, and then people were nice to me. Because I didn't threaten them. I didn't make them feel uncomfortable with my pain. But there's a lot of people who feel uncomfortable with their pain and can't hide it so well. And then it makes everyone else feel uncomfortable. And then they get treated poorly. And then it just emphasizes it and reinforces the negative. And it's like, you know, and it's like a vicious cycle. So if they can just take something temporarily for a couple of years, and they can kind of lift and do the work and learn to love themselves a bit more. Obviously, for someone who's going to be on medication long term, I would highly encourage them to find in tandem natural means, maybe a bit of wine every now and again, not so terrible if you're not an alcoholic. Maybe some other things that are available. But Yaakov, you're opening up a big topic, and it's a sore topic, because working for Amudim, I mean, that's like almost always a go-to. People coming in with such tremendous nisyonos. They've been abused. Not me, my father patched me and my Rebbe threw my kippah on the floor, and yes, it hurt. But there are some people who are coming in, and that really leads me to a whole other topic also, which is, where's HaKadosh Baruch Hu in all of this? You know, like, I once said something to a client, and afterwards we both realized how profound it was. He's like, "Yochanan, what's the point of feelings?" And I said, it was like Eureka moment. Feelings are meant to be felt. God gave us feelings to feel so that we can be vulnerable and human. God also gave us all of this pain. Anybody who's on medication today and who's listening to this, anybody who's thinking about going on vacation, or someone tells them they need to, they should know that God gave it to them, and God loves you. And he always means to do the next right thing for you, the next best thing for you. He's your best friend. So I'm getting a little emotional because I see people who are in so much pain all the time, and it kills me. I didn't have that. I have other things, other life things, very painful. But I didn't have that. And I imagine that emotional, mental anguish is probably from some of the worst anguish we can go through. And because it's every day, it's Yom V'Layla. So, God obviously believes in you and thinks you can handle it, and he gave it to you, and you have to somehow find that place to do gratitude. And when I was going through really dark times in my life, because even though I didn't suffer from mental anguish, God found his way to give me some darkness. And when I was going through that, it was only through the practice of gratitude and brainwashing myself. And that's where I wasn't feeling my feelings. Then I had to stop feeling my feelings. Like you say, when is it not good? Then I had to get, the garden of gratitude and chazer it every day. and just be grateful. And I join a email list of, email 100 people, 10 things of gratitude a day, just to bring myself back into positive thinking, positive functioning. As a teenager, I didn't have that. But as an adult, I did get whopped here and there, and I really did need to then do all of the CBT tricks and all of the DBT tricks and do what, what people who consider taking medication needed to do. Again, because I have a light personality and I don't suffer in that way from depression so much, I was able to do it with the gratitude lists. And that was a saving for me. If it wasn't for Rav Arush's Garden of Gratitude and a good friend who texted me every single day, Yochanan, what are you doing? Get out of bed, come meet me for a coffee. That chaver toiv, who I didn't have to pay. I would have maybe, who knows, maybe a psychiatrist would have said, Yochanan, maybe you should take some Klonopin for a few weeks. Maybe. But thank God I went to see a rabbi and he gave me the book and I read it like the Bible, every day. Thank you Hashem for this. Thank you Hashem for that. And I circumvented the pain and brought myself into a positive place.
Wow. You mentioned earlier also, and wondering how that fits in, with Hashem, and you said there's good pain and bad pain. Good tsar and bad tsar. Can you, what does that mean?
What I meant by that was lefumtza agro, right? You could be mitzar yourself the way you would by exercising and pushing yourself, and that's good pain, and that's pain that leads you to feeling good afterwards, right? And then there's self-flagellation and then things that I have to learn more, I have to do more, and criticizing yourself and pushing yourself or contorting yourself into a pretzel and, to be a people pleaser or other many, many ways of doing that. Or, the pain of a hangover from self-medication, waking up the next day and really being, hurt and hurting yourself. And that's bad pain, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to send us pain primarily. I'm not saying this is the only thing, but primarily as a wake-up call. There's a beautiful piece in the Derech Hashem. And people like to say, you probably grew up with this also, it should be a kapara, it should be a kapara. The Ramchal says, kapara, that's for the end of life. It's like end of life spiritual care. That's like when you're at the end of the road and Hashem wants to do rachamim with you and you were pretty good guys, you deserve to get hit down here instead of up there. So, okay, let's see what the ledger says. Let's give the guy some kapara and, get him into heaven. But he says in the middle of life, it's not kapara. Yeah, of course, whatever pain you suffer, there's going to be kapara part of it, but that's the tuffle. The ikr is the conversation. God is just talking to you. So if a person feels that and acknowledges that, that's good pain then. He's found a way to transform that and grow from it. But the pain of beating ourselves up and the pain of pushing ourselves down because we deserve to be punished or because we're bad, so that's like adding insult to injury. It's like victim blaming, almost. Not almost.
Wow. Hey, I wanted to read this excerpt from a book to you. It's a book called The Quest for Authenticity. A friend of mine actually clipped this picture. He told me the idea, and I was like, you got to send me the piece. So I want to read it to you. It's all about pshischa. And so this is a piece from the Yid. The Yid used to teach over the following medrash. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said that nobody ever honored their parents more than I. Yet Esav did. But when I served my father, I would wear dirty clothes. And when I went outside, I would get rid of the dirty clothes and dress in fine clothes. But Esav didn't do that. When Esav would serve his father, he would all the time be in his best clothes. So the Yid explained. He said, why couldn't Reb Shimon ben Gamliel wear fine clothes like Esav did when he's serving his father? So here's the Yid's explanation. Clothes are a means of projecting an image. Esav served his father in his best clothes is a way of saying that he projected a positive image of himself to his father. He would ask his father how one can tithe hay and salt. And though he deceived his father with this piety, ultimately, Yitzchak would not have wanted to have been deceived. On the contrary, he would have preferred to have seen his son's faults, and that way he can work with them. Nevertheless, for a moment, Yitzchak enjoyed tranquility, imagining that his son was happy. It's with the same approach that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said, I can't honor my father like Esav. He was not prepared to hide his faults from his father. On the contrary, he wore his dirty clothes. He would reveal his reality to his father, character faults, warts, everything. And though his father would ultimately approve of such an approach, because it allows him to correct the character failings of his son and to show him the godly path, nevertheless, for the moment, his father was in pain. And so the Yid held that this was the same thing with our relationship with Hashem. That he would say that the seal of God is truth. Can one truly really be truthful with God, or even with oneself? Can one ever know if the path one is following is really true or false?
Mm.
So he would say that each person really needs to take off the lid, and everything is put under scrutiny to catch a glimpse of ego or ulterior motive. Anything that might be impure, anything that might erect a barrier between Hashem and his servant, truth has been redirected from a description of God to a clarity of self-perception for an individual process.
Beautiful.
Okay. So, I mean, to me, I feel like this has definitely been in my journey and what I've learned from you a lot about the willingness to feel and the willingness to be okay with my pain. Really takes like the kink out of the wire. It makes
I like to say humiliation leads to humility. Like inside the word of humiliation is humility. And it's, if I don't feel my fear, then I don't get to the place of lo irara ki ata imadi. I'm not scared because you're with me, but I first have to be scared. And that's when I'm open to saying, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. I'm so desperate for something to help me. And then I realize, oh, right, there is one that could help me. Ki ata imadi. So I bring God into my life when I can
trust
admit.
God, though, if God is the one who gave you the pain and gave you the fear and gave you the, how can you then trust him that he's going to take it away? Like, what are you trusting actually?
Excellent question. A lot of people who go through pain have trust issues, right? People who are abused, people who are hurt by the people who are supposed to take care of them at times. So that leads to a huge trust issue. I remember when I was in second grade, and maybe the refuah came before the makkah, but I had this like amazing inspirational Shmon Esrei as a second grade little boy, where I spoke to God maybe for the first time. And I asked Hashem, I don't know what I asked him, maybe to get a good grade on my test, something. And then that day, I get called out of class, and the principal says, you cursed out an old lady on the bus. I did no such thing, by the way. But because I had a lot of azus, I challenged the bus monitor who told me to sit down. He was in fifth grade. And I said, I'm not going to fifth grade. You're not going to tell me what to do. And he didn't like that at all. And I got in his face. And I was a bit, I was a bit tough. My siblings used to make fun of me, called me Mr. Tuffy. As a little boy, I was ready to fight for the cause. So he told the principal that I cursed an old lady out the bus. I used the F curse, and I never even knew that word. But the principal believed the bus monitor, and he took my kippah, and he put it on the floor, and he says, you don't deserve to wear this. I'm like, really? Whoa. And I remember, being in such shock, and realizing, wow, authority can really be messed up. And maybe from there, I learned to really fight and challenge Rabbeim all the time. It led me to a lot of trouble. I got kicked out a lot. But there's got to be a better way, Rabbi, than to take off my keyboard, to throw me out of class every day, or to put my desk actually outside the class. Like in fifth grade, I spent half the year in the hallway because I challenged, right? So trust is huge. How do you get to a place of trust when your trust has been so defiled and broken? And then, King David, who was the great feeler, the great singer. You read King David, and he was feeling all the time. I mean, he was ostracized. He was out there. And Rabbi Nachman really told us, talk to God in your own words, like King David had to do when he was tending the sheep. Just walk on the hillside and talk and talk and talk, and realize that Al tivtechu b'nedivim. You can't trust the nedivim. You can't trust them. Only one you can trust is Hashem. And I believe that if a person's willing to take the trust challenge, how much chutzpah Coke had? Or was it Pepsi? No, it was Pepsi. Had such chutzpah. When I was a kid, it said, take the Pepsi challenge. I was like, come on. Everybody knows Coke is the king. Coke is better than Pepsi. But Pepsi blindfolded you and said, taste this and taste this. It's Pepsi. I can't believe it's Pepsi. They had such chutzpah to challenge the status quo because they believed in their product. Maybe they actually switched around and gave the guy Coke. But I think Pepsi actually has more sugar. So initially, it did get a lot of people. So I tell people, take the God challenge. Hashem says you can test me. He says with Meiser you can test me, but also I believe you can always test God in a personal way and thank him. Rav Arush did this for me. I remember I was going through a really hard time in life, and I read in somewhere in the Garden of Gratitude that you could even thank God al ha'asid. Thank him on the future. I thought, wow, that's a radical idea. So I took a few of my problems and I started thanking God for already taking care of them. And then they started being taken care of. At one point in my life, I had a horse. I didn't know what to do with my horse. I was moving back to the city. I was moving back to Jerusalem, and I couldn't bring my horse. And oh my gosh, horses are so expensive. Okay, it's 1,000 shekels a month just to feed them. Okay, I'm like, what am I going to do? While I was living out in the middle of nowhere and had low rent, okay, I can handle a horse. But now what am I going to do in Jerusalem? The palace of the king is not a great place to just have your own private stable. So I started thanking God. Thank you, Hashem, for taking care of Mika Mocha. That was the name of the horse. Thank you, God, for taking care of him. Thank you, God, for finding the right home for him. And I get a phone call from this guy who says, hey, actually, no, that's not what I called him. I heard that, he worked for the ranch near where my horse was. And I said, can you take the horse? And he's like, yeah, I'll take the horse. And I was like, nisvaya. Now, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu can really get you out of a bind. And let me tell you something, it's a pretty big bind when you have a horse and you don't know what to do with it. So, like you build that relationship with God. You build your trust back. You take the first step by saying, I'm willing to trust you. And these are my laundry list of problems. And you start thanking Hashem and start trusting him. And like Rabbi Nachman says, when you thank Hashem, you say something is good, even if you didn't initially believe it's good, God says, you think that's good? I'll show you good. And it's the same thing with negativity. God forbid. Someone says, oh, this is bad. God says, I'll show you bad. So the whole time, remember, it's a conversation. If Hashem is sending you bad things, it's because he wants you to turn around and say, it's good. I trust you. And then Hashem will, in kind, prove to you that he's there. And every one of us can have a personal relationship with someone, something you can trust. And then once you do that, you reinforce it and you reinforce it. And the next time you come across that old friend of yours, old faithful fear, and you're scared, maybe you're, financially scared, maybe you're scared in a relationship, maybe you're scared, right, with, any kind of insecurity, and you give that over to Hashem, that will in turn help you solidify your trusting relationship with Hashem. But excellent question, and it's real. We have trust issues.
Wow.
When I was a kid, I had terrible anxiety. We were speaking about the people who go down get depressed. Well, the people who go up, they suffer from anxiety. Because doing this all the time creates a nervy buzz in your limbic system. And the way you relate to things is like speeding him, outrunning them, outgunning them, outthinking them. And I remember walking to the bus stop, and all of a sudden everything would get really fast and start speeding up. And I was trying to prove to myself that things are slow by moving slowly, but it wasn't working. And the biggest fear of my anxiety attack was, besides the fact that I would die, was that it would never end. And I had to really learn how to slow down that anxiety. And the way it works, the way it really works so well, is by calling it what it really is. I am scared. And I'm allowed to be scared. Once I did that, the anxiety dropped into feelings.
How old were you then?
Whew. I was like in 5th grade. I was probably in the hallway days. Those weren't such great days.
In 5th grade, and you were dealing with this by feeling it? Like you knew what you were
No,
doing?
then I wasn't. Then I didn't know how. You know, how did I deal with it then? Paper airplanes, you know, the perfect fold, you know, like, you know, origami, you know, often the way I dealt with it was socially. That was my go-to, because I'll tell you, it's not a secret, but if it is for anybody, here's this. Hashem gives you the gifts that you need to deal with you. So my talent, I have a talent for being sociable, let's say. That's what I'm going to use to also deal with my pain. I'm not going to reinvent something I'm not good at to help me cope with my pain, right? The comedian is really funny. So he uses humor to deal with the fact that maybe he's overweight, right? So Hashem, whatever Hashem gave you, your gifts are what you're going to actually use to deal with it. Let's say you're really smart. You're going to use your intelligence to outthink your problems, or to become really smart in certain areas to prove your self-worth, right? If you're really handy, if you're really strong, you're going to use that to get social credit, you know, like communism, you know, your social credit score. You're going to build your social credit score with what you're good at. And then you have to, then when you get a bit older, realize that maybe I'm using that like to a fault, to like a drug. And I have to peel it back and say, even though these things are talents of mine, but I'm not letting in the other things as well. And I have to balance as I get older.
Wow. So let's say somebody is struggling with anxiety or these kind of things. What would you suggest? And let's say it's not something that they're, for whatever reason, you know, they're not going to see, maybe they should see a professional or they're not, or maybe it's just a lot of everybody, like Yaakov said earlier, everybody's struggling with this. And, you know, what would you suggest is a good starting point to work on this or to deal with, you know, the anxiety and the frustrations?
So, I mean, I'm taking a page out of Arthur Janow's book. I like to talk about 6 primal feelings. There's happy, angry, sad, scared, lonely, and also guilty. I'm bad. I'm a loser feeling. I'm inadequate, right? A lot of men suffer from inadequacy. And I try to get them to use the primal word as opposed to the word anxiety. Say I'm scared. Instead of saying I'm bored, say I'm lonely. Instead of saying, you know, I'm really upset or annoyed, or, you know, say I'm angry. And when we use the right term, we're doing a little bit of taking it from externalizing the issue by using a secondary word or descriptive word, and I'm bringing it closer to my heart. The closer I am to it, the better I can deal with it. Imagine a Frisbee. If it's here, I can flick it to my friend, but it'll only go about 10 meters. But if it's here by my heart, I could send it across Gonzaga, right? I could send it far, you know? Another mashal I like to use for people to help explain this is, imagine you're in Disney World and you're looking for the roller coaster that you want to go on. And you get to that map, you know, that's there, and you see where the roller coaster is and you want to get there. You can't start moving until you find the red dot, which is you are here. Now, our ego says, I want to be right next to the roller coaster and cut the lines. But the reality is, it's a 10-minute walk away. And I first have to accept I can only take the very next step from where I am. So that you are here is a way to bring down your anxiety levels, to bring down the levels of feeling alienated and bringing them closer to yourself where you can really hold them. You ever see Mighty Ducks? Do you remember when he's sliding the egg across the ice and the kids are sitting there with their hockey sticks and they break on the stick?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, let me show you how it's done. They slide the egg and Emilio Estevez takes the stick and he pulls it back. And he teaches them how to catch the egg. And then you're in control of the egg, right? So my feelings, if I'm not accepting them, they're going to crash against my hockey stick. But if I just receive them and accept them, now I've got them. Once I've got them, I can now deal with them. Now, why don't we do that? Like you said before, because it's painful. So I need to accept that I'm in pain. I need to make pain okay. I need to say, a big thing I used to tell myself all the time is, I'm a human being. Allowed to feel this. I used to tell myself all the time, I'm allowed. I'm allowed to feel this. I'm just a human being. Now, human beings are also exceptional and amazing, but for this exercise, it helped me to realize that human beings have flaws. Human beings are vulnerable. Human beings have weakness. It's okay. And by that keyword of acceptance, so I accept those feelings, now I can begin to look at myself a bit more compassionately.
Wow. Well, that's huge. And so let's say when somebody does this work, they do the work of accepting the feelings.
Dude, I'm giving you all of my best stuff, all of my mashallah that I use in my work.
I know this is amazing. I'm loving this. This is I'm enjoying this so much. I could listen to you go on, and this is phenomenal. I have listened to you for many years, but this is awesome. You're also just bringing it all together. Really, really appreciate this.
One day we'll do a Shabbaton.
Amen. Yeah, we've been talking about this. We gotta pull that off. I want to bring up maybe another specific Indian that you could talk about. I know this is something that many people have touched on. Guilt. So I there's some people like to call it guilt versus shame, or Jewish guilt, Christian guilt, good guilt, bad guilt. I don't know. Could you open that up? And especially you mentioned that one of those core emotions was guilt. And the truth is that if you would have asked me to make a list of core emotions, I don't know if I would have thought that guilt would initially be on there, because guilt is seems like a pretty complicated one. So
yeah, it actually wasn't always on the list. It was kind of like an add-on. But
where's
I realized
that list from,
by
the way?
Huh?
It's your list?
No. The list, Arthur Janov talks about primal feelings, but he has 5, and the guilt was added on by some of his students, and my teacher also felt it was very powerful. The Jews, of course, felt it was very powerful. The Jews and the Catholics and the Mormons. But guilt is really, really big. And one way of looking at it is really as underlying all of them in a certain way. And I found in my work, I didn't always have the confidence to say this, but after doing this private work for many years now already, I could say that at the end of the journey, often it's the guilt that people are really left with. That's the core nut to crack, if you will. Let's just say this also because it's an important piece of information. Often the anger for men is like a natural feeling. We're allowed to feel it. Boys are allowed to be angry. Girls are allowed to be sad. So girls have a harder time admitting they're angry, and boys have a harder time admitting they're sad, right? It's more vulnerable, it's more weak. And girls have a harder time admitting they're angry because girls aren't allowed to be angry. They're allowed to be sad, which creates a lot of angry women. They're not allowed to feel it. But, and a lot of sad boys. So there's kind of like this thing that happens that when you feel a feeling and you kind of deal with it, then the next vulnerable feeling will come up. So if you're angry and you're done feeling the anger and you're really at peace with all of your anger, underneath the anger is often a protective feeling, right? It's often like fight or flight. It's like, or freeze, but it's like the strength that you get when you get angry. So it's like a protective, a defensive feeling. After that, often is I'm scared. It's interesting to note that more violent crimes are committed because of fear than anger. Because when I'm in anger, I'm in a way more control. And I have less of a need to act impulsively when I'm so angry. But when I'm scared, I can do crazy things. I can be really violent and dangerous because I feel so out of control that I need to control by maybe hurting someone else, dominating someone else. So that's interesting. It's even more scary and dangerous to feel fear. And underneath that, underneath what am I scared of? So often I'm scared of maybe feeling sad, or I'm scared of feeling bad. I'm scared of admitting that I'm bad. Now, sometimes guilt is real. Like you said, I did something wrong. But what happens to me when I make a mistake is I internalize it and I say I am a mistake. It becomes global. It spreads over everything. Because I suppressed it, I lost touch with it and it kind of spread everywhere. Or unfortunately, sometimes mechanchim, parents maybe, didn't give us the message that this was a mistake, but you're not a mistake. You failed, but you're not a failure. Sometimes kids, we get such an intense message of a failing that we become a failure. And we internalize and we make it about me because we're so egocentric, because we're, that's how we work. So that's a big problem. We have to learn how to make that lumdisha palgina, which is because I failed doesn't make me a failure. So there is a fair amount of coming back to Hashem, and this is where trust really comes in big. To be able to admit to God my failings means I really trust him, right? I'm safe with him to tell him that I failed in all these ways. So when I can do that, sometimes we don't want to admit it because we don't want to change. Because my activity that I'm doing is protecting me. And there are layers to all of this. We can't, we can't go into too much of it. But once a person is able to admit that they failed in something, that's when he can forgive himself. The forgiveness will come in once he's able to accept that bad feeling. And then comes a voice, but you're not bad. Because your neshama is always there for you. This pristine part of you, you can never make bad. Yes, maybe you damaged yourself. Maybe you drank and you hurt your body. Maybe you weakened yourself. Maybe you made yourself, and you created a certain amount of, you lost time by not learning and by not doing mitzvahs. Maybe there's a lot to regret. You always have to go back to that core self. Who am I really? Really, I'm a neshama. And my neshama is still and always capable of greatness and turning everything around. Like Rav Elazar ben Durdai, flipping it all around. Vina'afach, really becoming great, even in a moment, even in a few days of crying, you can really do it, but you have to cry. Sometimes you have to cry to get to that place of knowing how good you really are. When people say, but I'm not good, Yochanan. I did this, I did that. And sometimes they get pretty convincing arguments. They did some pretty bad things, So sometimes I chide them. I say, no dead bodies, right? So let's not be too hard on yourself. But really, sometimes they have a laundry list which is hard to deal with. And I remind them that there's a part of them which is a chelik al-kami mal. There's a part of them which is God. You're essentially good. Your core is good. These are things you've done. But you are good. And when you can really tap into who you really are, and even more so, you can tap into what Hashem did. Hashem made you. Hashem gave you all these nisyonos. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't make mistakes. He didn't, mess that one up. He's going to become a serial killer. No. Hashem made you. Hashem is good. It starts with that faith, with that belief. And obviously most ruba de ruba of my clients believe in God. So it's not so hard for them. They can believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu really does good and start with me. He made me good. When I tap into that essential goodness, I can kind of heal my guilt. Some of it is appropriate because I did something wrong, and the rest of it is just because I've assumed I'm bad because I did bad things. A lot of it is also superimposed by bad chinuch. They made me think I was bad.
So guilt means like when I feel like I am bad and I am not worthy and I'm not good enough and all that. So what we're saying is that we want to recognize our failures for what they are and saying they are wrong and we do need to fix them. And yes, it was a bad thing to do, but it doesn't mean that I am essentially bad.
Right. And also to be mamtik a little bit that din on yourself, because you have to realize we're so critical because we've been taught to criticize also, but also because it's like our go-to. We as natural human beings, we want to succeed, and when we don't, we give ourselves a hard time because there is such a drive to succeed. Because the subconscious and our neshama is always trying to get us to be light, and because we know deep down we are light, it's very hard to cope with the little bit of bad dots that we have. Because you have something so pristine, it's like something's not pristine. It's like very, traumatic in a way. So I like to be mamtik the din on ourselves by saying, give it a little bit of context. Yes, you did that bad thing. Did you really want to do that bad thing? Or did you have a compulsion? You felt like you needed to. Did you lie because you thought, I'm going to mess this person over? Because you were scared. When I was a kid, I lied all the time. And even now, my wife sometimes looks at me and says, you don't have to lie to me. I love you. I care about you. I'm like, really? You do? You're not gonna be upset with me? Now I'll say, where were you? I was here and I was there. I'll be home at 9:15. Like 9:45, I come home. Where were you? She's like, just tell me you bumped into a friend and maybe you sat on the street corner and schmoozed, and you didn't necessarily think about me. It's okay. I accept you. And that, for me, obviously the safety of a good relationship is amazing. A lot of people don't have that. And it's hard. We have to do that for ourselves. I bless everybody to have that in their life, and I do now, and it's really helpful for me. But if you don't have that, if you're with someone who's always angry at you for small infractions, well, then you do have to really be that lover of self for yourself and remind yourself, you didn't lie. You didn't do that mistake because you wanted to. You were just scared. Why were you scared? Oh, I'm scared because when I was a kid and I didn't curse out the window, I got my kippah thrown on the floor, or other primal scenes, I call it, other times in your childhood where you were really violated. And it's the times when you were violated that taught you not to trust the world. And because you don't trust the world, you sometimes do other things to fill that hole. They say to fill the God-sized hole. So really, we try filling it with other things, but we realize it's a God-sized hole. It can only be filled with God. It can only be filled with that love of self and self-acceptance. But I have a hole, and I've yet to meet a person who doesn't have that hole. Some holes are bigger than others, but there's no one who doesn't have that hole. We're designed by the great designer to have that hole, to fill it with him. So,
I mean, I think also maybe some people there's a fear that if I don't give up, if I don't hold on to that guilt, if I don't hold on to that, then I'm just going to start, maybe I'll just do lots of bad things. Maybe I'll lose it.
Absolutely. That is a fear. If I tell myself that what I'm doing isn't so bad because my Rebbe yelled at me when I was in 3rd grade, well, then I justify it. So true. So we need to, again, it's nice to have a chaver tov and good people around us to realize that would not be a good approach. Do I feel good after I imbibe again in some behavior that wasn't good for me? When I rationalize and I'm a moira heter, do I feel good or bad afterwards? What does my heart really say? If my heart really says I feel guilty or bad or dirty afterwards, I have to listen to that. I have to train myself to trust. First and foremost, learn to trust myself, my own heart.
Yeah. Wow. I would love to share a story and get your feedback. I had an interesting experience. I think I've done a lot of this work, and I'm still working on it, and hearing you talk about it is so inspiring, and it definitely makes me want to bring it to the next level. And I know that as I open up, different awarenesses and depths within myself, I'm finding new pain and new suffering, and sometimes I'll find it and I'm like, I don't know how to resolve it. Like you said, like to be mamtik it, just accepting it and learning to love myself and say, saying it's okay that I'm feeling these pains, that itself is a big hamtaka. But also learning how to sometimes cope with it. Sometimes many times I don't even know how to. I'm like, I don't know how to deal with this. I find that in many ways I do trust Hashem and I have a lot of emunah. And sometimes I look at myself, I'm like, I don't even know how I could trust you, Hashem. Like, you're so frightening to me because even though ultimately you have this idea that like everything is going to be good and that maybe you're giving me this pain for good, but like your pain for ultimate good is downright scary. I mean, part of your ultimate good plan does include serial killers and did include a Holocaust and did include every single page of history is covered with our blood. And entering into the month of Tammuz, to me, I get this little feeling of like, oh man, is it what's this year going to bring? And is it going to be another one of those painful times? Because, we've been so bad, or like really, right, with the spies, with the Meraglim we just had in the Parsha and having it this time of year, it's like, oh, you cried for no reason? I'm going to give you a reason to cry. And we've been crying throughout history because of it. And it's like, that's frightening. We call Hashem Noira.
Yeah.
It's scary. Hashem is scary. And
yeah.
he's so far beyond. Infinity is scary to me. I'm like a little physical dude. And just his concepts of infinity is so big. It's like, it's frightening to me. So I definitely struggle with a lot of this. And I think that in my conversations with Hashem, I feel like there's something that comes up. I heard a beautiful story about this, a
I was
gentleman.
waiting for the story. You said story.
Right.
I was
Well,
like, I want a story.
This is actually a story before I get to that other story. This is kind of like my preamble to talking about how I'm learning to love myself and learning to accept Hashem's love for myself, which I think that part of my fear of him is maybe that I'm learning that maybe I haven't really been loving my own self. And as I learn to love my own self, maybe I can learn to trust him, even though trusting in him is so beyond. Meaning, right? I don't know. I would love some insight over here.
You never know.
Mamish. You never know.
You never know. It's important that when we have these conversations and we're so excited about the tools we've learned and the information we got, to always remember, you never know.
That's right. That's right. My Rebbe, Rabbi Gerzi, always says, he goes, you could do all the exercises and everything, but know that it's all a matana. Like, we don't know. Like, maybe you need to go through this. Like, it just, we do what we can. And it is a really tough, it's a tough challenge. Like, because it's a tough challenge doing this work, because on the one hand, I want to do it and I want to feel better. On the other hand, I have to accept not feeling better. I have to accept that I'm imperfect. But I'm suffering with all this pain and all the challenges of my life. The only way that I'm going to get there is by being okay with imperfection.
Right. It's counterintuitive. Like,
right.
I should feel more pain. I came to you to feel better.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's also with Hashem. It's like the only way to really trust that I'm finding for myself, the way that I can trust Hashem is by learning that I don't really get what I'm trusting. Like, I'm not trusting that everything is going to be pain-free, because God has already proven that this world is not pain-free.
Yeah.
But we're
scared to level up also.
Yeah.
Because like Rabbi Nachman says, why all of a sudden is it so hard again? Oh, because you leveled up. You were doing great and you were inspirational and you were giving podcasts. And all of a sudden, bink. And like you think, where has it all gone? And Rabbi Nachman reminds us of that no, you just went from the top of one tier to the bottom of the next. And
that's so cool. When you just said leveled up, so you meant going up a stage, but there's another meaning for leveled up, which is I leveled up with you and I got open and honest with you.
Ooh, right.
And I was thinking, because when you said it, I was like, ooh, you have to level up with God and be like, God, you're scary to me. And that's actually a new level. That's also leveling up. Like, so we can, and being leveled up, being authentic, being like, Hashem, you scare me. Your truth and your goodness is also downright frightening. So this gentleman who was struggling with, he couldn't daven to Hashem. And he came to this tzaddik. It was post-Holocaust. They both, the tzaddik and this gentleman, had gone through the Holocaust. And so he looks at the tzaddik. He says, how can you trust God? How can you believe in him and trust him if he was okay with the Holocaust and he was okay with all the pain that he gave us? How do you dive to God? And so the tzaddik looked at him and he said, what do you think I talk to God about? He says, this is where my conversation starts.
Bidiyuk. And people say sometimes to me, like when I was in Kola and I was helping out the young guys, I can't daven. It's so like, that sounds like the beginning of a great prayer.
Right. And that's leveling up.
Being level.
I'm going to be straight with you, right? I'm going to be straight with you. So I had this personal interesting experience when happened about, I guess, a little over a year ago. It was on Tu B'Shvat, and I was sitting in the morning of Tu B'Shvat, and I like to send myself voice notes. I'm either through, voice recorder or, and I'll listen to them and I'll talk to myself and it helps me kind of be able to hear myself. And it was
cover toy we got.
Yeah, definitely. And I might have actually even sent you this message at some point. I wonder. It was like a 5-minute message to myself about self-love. And it was about how I wanted to love myself and I wanted to take care of myself. I wanted to do good things for myself. And about a month later, I had decided, I want to quit smoking cigarettes, even though I wasn't smoking a lot, but it was starting to become consistent again. And I'd quit years before, and then smoke one here, smoke one there, and it was starting to come, and I didn't like it. And I knew that it wasn't healthy, and I knew it wasn't something that I wanted to always be part of my life. But here it was, So I say, I'm not going to smoke from now until Lag BaOmer. When I go to Reb Shimon in Meron, I'll smoke a cigarette there. And I had this like good feeling about it. I get to Meron Lag BaOmer, and a friend of mine comes up. He goes, "Oh, you've been waiting for the cigarette. Here, I have a cigarette for you." And he rolls me a nice, good rollie, not one of these like, nasty smelling, large production ones. A nice, good, fresh tobacco. It's good. I take the cigarette. I start smoking it.
Trigger warning. No, just kidding.
And I feel horrible.
Ooh.
Horrible. Like, not physically, emotionally, I'm feeling horrible. And so I finished the cigarette, and I'm still smiling, as you said, coping so well. And of course, I'm by Reb Shimon, and I made the whole trip to get there. And of course, like, I need to feel good, and I'm by the tzaddik, and I'm meeting my friends, and of course, it has to be good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I start walking away after, and I'm like, Yehuda, you feel horrible. What is going on? And I was like, you're right. I really am feeling horrible. Like this horrible feeling of loneliness, of just so stinky.
Mm.
And I don't know how long it took me, but I realized, hey, this smoking of a cigarette wasn't a kindness to Yehuda. This smoking the cigarette was actually saying, I don't care about you, Yehuda. I don't love you, because if you really love me, you would accept this pain, and you would work through this, and look, this whole, and I realized that when I had quit smoking, it was this ease. There was a certain ease with it. I still had the desire for it, but there wasn't this constant friction. It wasn't a constant violent, fight with it. And I realized that was because of this love. And I re-listened. It might have even been that I listened to the self-love voice note, by Reb Shimon, and then it triggered the whole thing about, oh my gosh, this is where it came from. And for the next, since then, I haven't smoked cigarettes, and
Wow.
it has been an avoda of deep love for Yehuda. Like I love myself, and Yehuda, I'm doing this for you. And me holding back from doing this has been a way of loving myself.
By accepting the bad feeling, then you were able to then overcome it. Because, why do we do these things? Often the way the subconscious works is if whatever I'm suppressing, that's what I am now subconsciously creating in my life. Why? Because my subconscious wants to heal. My neshama wants to heal. So it's always going to put in front of me the thing I need to face. Right. So if I run away from it this way, I'll come face it this way. And I can't get out of it. I can't get out of those patterns, those addictions, until I face what it is I'm actually feeling in the first place. Once I feel it, then it could be like, oh, feelings were meant to be felt. God gave you the feeling, and you received the message. And once you receive the message, you don't need the same message again. You're ready to do something else.
Yeah, the Baal Shem Tov has a beautiful Torah in Keser Shem Tov where he says on the pasuk, he says, the way that you see Mitzrayim today, you will never see them again. It was by the Yam Suf. Now, I think it's such a deep emotional lesson. So he says, there's a woman who was running from one city to another city because the pain of labor in that city was too much for her. So she came here. And he's like, so he says, that's what the Jews saw by Mitzrayim, is that they left Mitzrayim and they said, okay, maybe I could run away from my pain. And then suddenly they saw, V'hinei Mitzrayim nosim acharem, that Mitzrayim was running after them. And they go, oh my gosh, I can't leave my pain behind me. I can't just get rid of it. And Hashem says, accept it. And once you can be with the pain, this is the Baal Shem Tov's teaching over there. He says, once you can really sit with it, if you really resolve it, then you'll never see them again. You'll have a different challenge, but that will be, we'll also call it Mitzrayim. But the way that you see them today, you'll never have to see them again.
Right. A lot of times I call this work Tikkun HaMidos. This is the good work. This is our Yiddishkeit. It's alive. People sometimes say, well, where is this psychology in the Torah? Where's this method in the Torah? I'm like, all over. The great masters, the Hasidic masters, everyone was trying to dumb it down for us until so we can talk about it today in these psychological terms. But really, they spoke about all these things in very, that's why in the beginning you're like, oh, we have more of it now, more of it that. I don't know. It could be there were some times and periods of time where people were really sorted out.
Yeah.
and had shleimus. They got it directly from the Torah, you know? And you know, a lot of times now, you know, like what's tefillah even called? Avodah shebalev. If you don't have a heart, you can't do tefillah. So one of my, you know, I know we're going to be getting going in a few minutes. I just want to say one nice thing that I tell people is when they say, how do I daven with feeling, you know, they ask me, well, what are some of the benefits from this therapy? I'm like, you can really daven after doing this. Why? Because you take 3 steps back, and the first thing you do is you say how you feel. You take those 3 steps forward and you just say, God, I feel, and whatever that feeling is, Hashem svasai tiftach.
Wow.
And you start Shemona Esrei. Because until you're feeling what you're feeling, it's not avodah shebalev. So, for sure, the Baal Shem Tov and all the people who were standing, you know, we're like these little people on the giants, you know, shoulders giant.
Gewalt, Rabbi Yochanan, this has been amazing. Really, really has been amazing. I've learned so much, and just sharing this time with you is awesome. Thank you.
I really want to thank you for inviting me, and I want to thank your listeners for listening, because you know, it's important that when we share ideas, we know we're sharing them with our greater chevra, our greater friend circle. And yeah, I love talking to you as well, and I have tons of good things to say about you as well. I feel a bit awkward. You're saying all these nice things about me. Yehuda Raice, you know.
Well, yeah, Yaakov had to leave in middle, so
I know. And
he also said
Yaakov and
goodbye.
I know each other for like 20 years already. Went to yeshiva together, and we were doing this together. We were tripping over our own feet together. You know, like, you know, when you don't take the very next step in front of you, like try taking the second step in front of you. You can't do it, right? Because you just fall on your face. So Yaakov and I were young together and going through the yeshiva things together and growing together. And you guys, the whole mishpacha really have such a deep, meaningful place in my heart. And I love you guys, and thanks for having me.
I love you too. This has been an honor. I'm looking forward to having you back another time, Bezrat Hashem.
Amen.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
You too. Have a great Shabbos.